Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. I've met many people during my career, and have spent many hours on stage on and off with these musicians talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script. And through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you. Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. My next guest is somebody who I actually spent some time with behind bars. No, I mean, I spent with traveling the country as one of the original members of the Southern Comfort Dixieland Jazz Champions. Ta-da! Clarinetist extraordinaire and great sax player, Mr. Mark Curry. Hey, Mark.
Good to see you, Dan.
I got to tell you that all the time we were doing that, which I believe was 1980, you were my oasis away from extreme harsh criticism. Because if you remember, I was just under the gun. I was new to the style and new to tuba, and here I am trying to find my way between Howard Alden and Dan Barrett and Brian Shaw, and you were very kind, and not that I mean you were, of course, a seasoned veteran by that time too, but I thank you. You gave me a compliment one night, and that I still remember, and I carry close to my heart, which is you turned to me and said, "Dan, you've got big ears." And I went, somebody's noticing I'm working. So, anyway, thank you.
That's great. Well, I think, Dan, I think there was an element that we were kindred spirits because I was hanging on for dear life, trying to keep up with our colleagues who are just such stellar musicians and were well before we met them, so I was just trying to stay out of trouble. And I was actually at the time, I was learning a different way of playing, or a different approach, that's for sure. I was really working hard at not being the second loudest clarinet player in the world.
Well, let's go back in a minute because I'm definitely going to get to that. So I've got to silence my phone now that you're here. And by the way, how you just going for an oil change or?
No, it was the 60,000-mile extravaganza.
Oh.
And I'm glad I took it in because I found out I had a crack in my catalytic converter, and it was creating an exhaust leak, which is dangerous. And I could smell it, and I was going to ask them about it. And fortunately, they found it, and it was still under warranty. So I feel very fortunate. You could have been reading about me in the newspapers,
True, and it wasn't a Dixieland clarinetist asleep in his car.
Yeah.
I want to go all the way back to pre-jazz minors. And,
sure.
And when did you actually start playing any instrument?
So I started playing piano when I was about 4 or 5 years old. My parents enrolled me in when it first started, the very first Montessori school in Eugene, Oregon. I lived in Springfield, but Springfield's right next to Eugene. And this Montessori school started.
You were born in Springfield then?
Born in Eugene, raised in Springfield. Oh, okay. Yeah. And, but, they're just separated by a river. I mean, they're sister cities and, right next to each other. And so anyway, at this Montessori school, they taught us music, and we did a lot of singing, and they had a piano teacher that would come and give private lessons to students there at the school. And then you could continue on with her and take lessons, which I did. And I played piano up until probably about 5th grade. And then decided I was bored with piano, about the time I started getting a little bit of technique, maybe a little bit. And of course, that's when, at least in my school system, I had transferred to a public school by then, and there was a band program. And, those instruments, boy, those look pretty cool. So I quit playing piano and ended up picking up the clarinet. And but so there was the piano, and my parents had a piano. My mother played piano. She played pretty well.
Okay.
She used to play, in churches and stuff, but she just sort of played for fun. But my parents loved to listen to music, and they were members of the RCA Victor Record Club, Record of the Month Club, and you could order records, and so you get these catalogs of records, and I could pick records out, and they picked, so we had a ton of records. I mean, a ton of records of all stripes and varieties. And we had this big old 1960 Magnavox console, AM FM tuner, 4 speakers. You could stack the records, and it played 78s as well. And I just sat in front of that thing and listened to a gazillion records of all kinds, and loved music. It was clear I had a interest in music. So anyway, I ended up on clarinet as a 5th grader in the school band program. And so then it gets progressively more complicated.
Now, going back to your piano teacher for a moment, was that a positive influence? Was it a nice person, a decent teacher?
Yeah, she was very nice. I have no idea whether she was a really good teacher or not. I mean, she managed to get me to play. I never practiced enough. My parents were very supportive, but not, you better practice. My mother her mother had created a terrible experience for her. And even though she became an accomplished piano player, it was through a lot of pain of having her mother, who knew nothing about music, standing over her with a metronome and basically shouting out commands and telling her what she should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And so my parents never took that approach. It was very laissez-faire. Whatever, I spent hours just free form. I'm not sure I'd call it improvising. It was actually probably a lot of noise making, but on our piano at home. And they didn't discourage me from doing that. They didn't say, "Oh, please stop doing that." They just let me experiment.
Cool. No, that's really wonderful,
Yeah.
actually. In my household, it was a little different because although they gave me an instrument because I was asthmatic, they said, "Here, Dan, take your trumpet." It was, "Don't practice the baby sleeping. Could you do that in the garage?" It was a kind of a slightly different experience. I wouldn't say encouraging,
Yeah.
but channeling me away into some place they didn't have to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate. I was the youngest. I have an older sister, so there was no younger child to be waking up. But,
you were the baby.
I was the baby. Yes.
All right. So now you went from there to obviously from 5th grade. So I did the same thing. I started in 4th grade, and then by the time we got to junior high, there was actually an organized band, as opposed to just a bunch of kids trying to play hot cross buns.
Yeah. And well, we 5th and 6th grade, we went to the high school and actually had our band in the morning before we'd go to elementary school. And so it was a real concert band. But yes, there was a lot of hot cross buns going on, just glorified. And it was the music teacher, I believe, for that program was the same music teacher that ended up being music teacher at my junior high school. He was a trumpet player but could get around on most instruments. Very supportive guy, Lyle McAlexander. And it was a 3-year junior high at the time in Oregon. It was a 3-year junior high, 3-year high school. They were experimenting with a novel curriculum program where students got to choose their electives. And they had electives in all the key areas like science and history and English. You could choose all these cool electives, and you had flexibility with your schedule. In junior high, I ended up taking 3 band classes at a time.
Wow.
3. So I was playing clarinet, trumpet, and ultimately ended up bass clarinet and alto sax.
I think perhaps I knew that you had played some trumpet at some point in time. I think we talked about that maybe 30 years ago or so. But so that's I didn't even get to. I mean, I ended up doing that by the end of high school. But to have that kind of exposure to different instruments in junior high is pretty amazing. Now, how did that transfer to your high school experience?
So then in high school, and this is where, I just so serendipity, and how things just shape up. Even then I had an interest in jazz in junior high. We had a system where you could challenge other musicians in your section to try and work your way up to first chair.
Now, was that because, because of the records your parents had? Is that what you heard jazz for the first time?
Maybe. I think, I certainly, I certainly knew who Pete Fountain was, and, had some records, listened to the Tijuana Brass and, artists that were popular that kind of crossed over between. And, but it seemed like in junior high, I would always pick these sort of jazz type tunes or pop tunes to challenge the person who was sitting in the chair higher than me. And, they would pick something more concert-like.
Right.
And I had the advantage because what I would do is I would just listen to the actual recordings of those tunes and then try and recreate that using the music. So even though I wasn't playing the music correctly, it sounded
musical.
I don't know. Yes, maybe, not so stiff. And so the kids would vote. We'd be in the band instrument room, the two people, right? So they didn't know who was playing, but of course they could tell who was playing, and they would vote. And so you could move up the chairs based upon the vote. And of course it was kind of a crazy system, but nevertheless, it kept me going and kept me interested. But in high school, what happened was our high school was fed by two junior highs. Rusty Stiers and Dale Dial, the original drummer of the Jazz Miners, went to that other junior high and ended up at the high school that I ended up. And that's when I first met Rusty and Dale. And Rusty, of course, I mean, just out of the gates, he already had a reputation. I knew that the junior high he went to had an unbelievable director who was very interested in teaching his kids jazz. And Rusty, wow. And then it was really only probably a matter of a month or so after I met Rusty that he said, "Hey, I'm forming this band. Would you be interested in maybe playing?" And, went out to his house. This was when we were sophomores. I think I may have even been 14 at the time or 15. Mm-hmm. Certainly 15 at the oldest.
That meant that Brad was 10. Anyway.
Well, he was either 13 or 14 when Brad and I met.
Kidding, but...
And Brad was already in the band. He was the banjo player. And he came, as he mentioned in his interview with, he came all the way down from Corvallis, Oregon. Rusty's parents and he lived out in the country a ways from my house. But talk about coincidences. When we showed up, my parents, of course, had to drive me out to the first rehearsal I went to. And on our way home, they said, "Yeah, Phil Stiers, Rusty's dad, he was our milkman for a number of years. He was the Echo Spring Dairy milkman." And then I remembered him. It was like, oh, that's why he looked so familiar. He was our milkman.
Oh gosh,
Phil was, sure. He's such a marvelous guy, and he had this amazing career history of all the different things that he did in his life. And I really do want to shout out Phil Stiers and Jan Stiers were so instrumental, no pun intended, in just being so supportive. My first soprano saxophone was given to me by Phil Stiers. It was one of his horns. And the time that they allowed us to spend at their house listening to records over and over and over and over and over and tapes over and over and over and rehearsing, hour after hour every weekend.
Yeah, for those who may not know,
3 years.
Jan Stiers was also the pianist for Professor Plum for a very long time.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And then of course with their connection,
on piano too, right? Lori, was that her name?
We did, yeah. Lori Moritz. She was from Junction City, and she was, I think John Brand was telling you about her, and sort of a Bonnie Raitt style singer, and having this sort of straddle. She really wanted to, I think her parents especially, but she also wanted to really go more that direction, somewhat of a Bonnie Raitt kind of
Western thing.
Well, or a blend, a real blend, but she had just a wonderful voice, and she had a wonderful sensibility about how to approach a tune vocally, even at a very young age, and just like bowled people over. And so, yeah, she was with us, the original piano player, and then ultimately, I think as John mentioned in his interview, decided that right before we went on tour, decided, I probably want to go the solo direction. The thought of touring, I think, was a bit overwhelming. So anyway, she went her own path, and she made a wonderful recording. I wish I still had a copy of the record. Her father hired the strings that played behind Moody Blues on their recordings, and there were just some marvelous pieces on it. And I don't think she ever saw the success that she was due. And life gets complicated and things happen, but she was fun to perform with, and of course the audience loved her because she really did entertain and could connect with people with the way she sang, and how funny she was and self-deprecating about, kind of like Bob Ringwald, about her not being able to see, and just really didn't let her slow that, she didn't let that slow her down. So anyway.
Yeah, I love that about Bob. This is your and my interview that we're doing today probably won't air until later on in December. But I'm letting you know that actually tomorrow, the Sunday after we film this, or tape this, that Bob Ringwald is interviewing me for this show. And
wonderful.
That was we've actually already done it. So if you want to see Bob Ringwald and I face off, it's an interesting thing. But.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I just don't want to forget. There have been a number of Phil and Jan Steyer's Rusty himself.
Yes.
And what they did, what they did for me, and I have here in front of me this. Can you read that? It says head charts, soprano sax, sax.
Head charts, soprano
sax. My background's kind of futzing with it a little bit, but Rusty, when he was probably 16 and I was 15, he would, I don't know when he did this, but he would make head charts for us. But they weren't your typical head charts. They were really just road maps. This probably isn't going to show given my background, but yeah, they were just like, okay, first chorus, ensemble, four bars of loud, and then 2 bars of soft, and then second chorus, repeat the first chorus, and then there's an interlude. And, this is the head chart for Mississippi Mud. But what was wonderful for me anyway was that Rusty and his parents exposed me to trad, real traditional, the source music.
Right.
So some of the very first tunes that we learned as a band were not the tunes that you would expect kids to learn in a Dixieland band.
Things like we did. Were learning things like Midnight in Moscow.
Oh no, going even further back. So we did the chant, Grandpa's Spells,
sure,
Sidewalk Blues, just and Skidacty Dat, all these old tunes, and Black Bottom Stomp. And we basically pulled them. We just listened to the original recordings a gazillion times and tried to mimic what they were doing. And of course, Rusty and Brad could play the solos, wonderfully. And the rest of us, again, were sort of, hanging on for dear life, trying to ad lib in that fashion.
I have yet to talk Rusty into doing an interview. He and I spent a lot of time together, 6 years at Knott's Berry Farm, and not to mention some time we spent on the road. And he's just reluctant to do it. I'm still trying to twist his arm. Yeah.
Well, I think it was helpful that, Rusty really wanted to play those tunes, and like the Louis Armstrong's, Hot 5 recording of My Heart, that was,
sure.
My memory is that's one of the very first tunes I learned how to play with this band, or maybe I didn't learn how to play it very well, but and so I think we were such a shock at the Jazz Society sessions. And then, of course, there are all the people at the Oregon Traditional Jazz Society who let us come and play once a month at their sessions. We had a slot. And, talk about support. and motivation to then work hard for the next month's session. We'd want to add a new tune and, showcase that tune. And we spent a lot of hours trying to do that. Things changed over time in terms of our focus and the mix of stuff. But anyway, I'll be quiet. You can fire another question.
The more you talk, the less work I have to do. So it's fine with me. But a lot of, and I've said it, obviously you've watched quite a few of my interviews, and I can't say it enough times that the Miners were superstars. As much of a superstar as you could be in any kind of early jazz. And it helped, of course, being very young and being very good and being very virtuosic in how you played. And I know all of you guys. In fact, I'm pretty sure I met you before Disneyland, because I remember Laurie and I remember original trombone players and long before you ended up with John Allred and Hubis and all those guys.
Yeah.
And I was always awestruck, of course. But I was wondering if there was a band before the Miners for you, or was that your first experience in jazz?
I think, aside from school bands, we had a pep band and we had a stage band. Oh, I take that back. The person who came into the band after Laurie left was Tim Klein.
Right.
And Tim was a few years older in school than Rusty and Dale and I were. But I had known him when I first started junior high school, because he was in high school at the time, and he grew up out in East Springfield, a little ways away. And I met him when I was probably a seventh grader. And he would come over from the high school and wow us all. He'd sit down at the piano and just, he was a god. Anyway. And Tim, so I had known Tim, and then I ended up having sort of a family connection. My sister knew one of his best friends, and so I knew, Tim and I had known each other for a long time. And when Tim came into the band, even before he came into the band, when, or maybe the band was going, I think the band was going, but he was a senior, I think, at the time, or maybe a junior, and he would occasionally hire us. His uncle would hire us, and we would play as the Kazooie Blues Band. That was the name of it. And, but I think Rusty was part of that too. So it was really contemporary with the Jazz Miners, but it had certainly a different focus. It was a little bit more jazz standards and, dance kind of jazz tunes for an older crowd that, wanted that at things.
Yeah. I don't know if you know Tom Hines, who's a great guitar player, and he teaches at several of the colleges down here. And I didn't know until I started talking to him that he was actually from the same area, but he was part of the more modern bebop contingent, parallel to when the Miners were going. And he was saying, it's really crazy that I grew up with all those guys, but we weren't part of the same scene. That it was, and there was no animosity. You just didn't travel in the same circles.
Yeah, right. And I was oblivious to that scene. I mean, I was sort of oblivious to a lot of the people who I just love and adore and respect. I didn't even know existed even then. I knew about the old recordings, but I really wasn't aware of some of the stuff going on. Now that changed once we started to get exposed and we started doing the festival down in Sacramento, the Jazz Jubilee, and then met people like Bill Allred and Rosie O'Grady's band and the other bands that we really adored, and we stole shamelessly from all those bands. I think John mentioned him stealing Eli Newberger's solo on Cannonball Blues, and then we were constantly trying to rip off or use the same kind of approach and pull off the arrangements that Rosie did with certain tunes. So we'd had this really weird mix of repertoire where we'd drop into a fairly traditional approach to a tune like the chant, right? I'll
Sure.
just use that as the example. And then the next tune might be Fidgety Feet in 5.
Okay.
You know, I mean, just, you know, weird stuff. And you know, Brian Shaw affectionately, I think, referred to some of that style that we played. He called it Slicksyland, which I thought was a great moniker. It was sort of souped up, you know, high energy. You know, a lot of, you know, we do, because I could play trumpet a little bit, barely. You know, and then for a while when Andy Martin was in the band, we had 2 trombones because Tim, the piano player, doubled on trombone. And so we do 4-horn stuff. So we'd throw in a couple of, 4-bar, 4-horn lick, you know, kind of thing in some tune. Or I can strike up the band. We had an arrangement that, and I can't remember whether it was Rusty's arrangement or Tim's arrangement, but we used 4 horns at the beginning, you know, and, you know, kind of built that up. And then, of course, I quickly dropped the trumpet so I didn't get into trouble, because once we got up to the upper notes, I'm done.
I mean, it's really interesting that a lot of the people who have been through that band are more modern jazz gods, and Andy Martin and John Allred and Tom Kubis and Matt Johnson, that have all been through the jazz minors.
And Eric Messerschmidt on tuba. When John left the band, Eric Messerschmidt joined, and I mean, Eric just
oh, I know,
what an incredible player. Just on both instruments, on tuba and string bass. Just you know, and it was so fun because on the bandstand, when we were on the bandstand, Eric was right here on my left, and Brad was right here, and Rusty, of course, was on my right, and to have you know, that rhythm section just cranking it, and then a trumpet player like Rusty, where, you know, I knew where he was, I knew where he was going to go, and he's so good at leading through what he's playing. I don't think I've met a trumpet player it's probably just simply because I spent so much time listening to him. Yeah.
Rusty plays incredible stuff, but he's consistent enough to know where he's going. In other words, Rusty's somebody, and I've played with a lot of guys, you know, including the great Brian Shaw and a lot of other people. And Rusty was the one who really taught me how to end a tune. Yeah. You know, there are certain triggers Rusty has about when you're going to go on into a chorus or when you're going to come back to a bridge. He has a way of playing that makes it clear what he's thinking.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we had a great time, and you know, the minors. I mean, we were lucky. We were fortunate. We were in the right place at the right time with the right kind of support and people who were really championing in us. Pardon?
The White House was before Disney when you went and played.
Oh yes, yeah, the White House opening for Bob Hope. You know, Bob Hope came to Eugene, and we were the opening act. You know, and
I was actually a jazz minor for one gig when I helped Rusty open for I think it was Al Hurt at the Irvine Spectrum, and I was a minor for a day, so I can.
Well, you know, we were just, you know, I feel so fortunate to have had the opportunity to, and then how it turned into the opportunity to meet such wonderful musicians, people who literally have shaped my thinking in life, but especially music. And, you know, it's just been amazing, you know, to have that happen. And, you know, when I left the minors, you know, it was sort of fun to tell people, yeah, they found a replacement. Yeah, I think he'll do okay. Yeah, Tom Kubis.
Well, it didn't help that we stole you away for almost an entire year with the Southern Covered Band either. That you know, that sort of left a cherry if you were necessarily didn't have to be, but
yeah. Anyway, I
know you were replacing Tom Kubis. I'd like to be able to say that.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Tom, by the way, too. His interview
good.
is dropping this coming Wednesday.
I'll look forward to that because, just a marvelous human being, and so, again, so supportive. And, a lot of the musicians I ended up playing with were very gracious because, I didn't have the discipline to put the attention to it that I wish I had and should have to be a better player. And they put up with that. So I'm thankful.
Well, I was always impressed. But then again, that was also the Southern Comfort Band was my first band. I was, when I was talking to Bob Ringwald, I had the unfortunate or fortunate, what am I trying to say? I started at the top of the mountain. I started in the style with Brian Shaw and Dan Barrett and Howard Alden. And when I found out what real jazz musicians were doing, I was going, are you kidding? Because where do you go from there? And from there, I went to Brad and Rusty, at Knott's Berry Farm. So I've had I've been in upper elevations when I really didn't deserve to be. And it was really an incredible ride for me. And I met you through all of that too. Also, what impressed me about you is you were the first person I heard play that solo from High Society correctly. When we were
that was we stole shamelessly with pride. Although we tried to make it our own, but that arrangement it's a Kenny Ball arrangement, and I tried my best to try and do justice to that solo off of that particular Kenny Ball recording. And I have a number of Kenny Ball recordings of that tune, and they're slightly, the clarinet player does a slightly different approach on the tune each time. But there was one recording in particular that and then the band, and again, that's where, someone like Rusty and whoever else happened to be on the trombone at the time, whether it was Andy or it was John or even Scott, because I think we had that tune in the books before Scott left the band, our original trombone player.
Right.
But what Rusty and the trombone player would do, as those solo choruses built, just created this incredible excitement, and then to have Brad and John just locked in along with our drummer, and they'd shift to this 4-beat, style, and it would just, the whole band just lifts up, and, who could go wrong? I could have just stood up there and, well, a lot of times I did, and just, wiggle my fingers around, and people would have loved it.
So what made you become a civilian? what that prompted you away from the musician's life?
Yeah, well, I think part of it was seeing and hearing how good musicians were that I was playing with. So Andy Martin. He's just an amazing trombone player. Of course, getting to know Dan and Howard and Brian, and the knowledge they had and how they approached it, and the sheer time they spent with it. And then, when John Allred came into the band, I was with Marvel. We'd be on breaks, and John would be standing backstage in a corner somewhere where he could play softly and no one could hear him. And he'd just be woodshedding the whole time. Not with any music, but just woodshedding the whole time. I just didn't have the discipline for doing that. I was thinking about it, and I remember instead of me going over to the corner and woodshedding like I should have been doing, I had a paperback book stuffed in, we wore these vests. And so I could slip it into my, the top part of my pants, and then the vests were kind of tight, and it would hold it right there in place. So no one knew I had a book when we were out playing in the park. And then on the break, I'd pull out my paperback book and I'd read. I was just interested in a lot of different stuff. And, I after 5 years there, it kind of, we worked a ton. We worked a lot of double shifts. We worked every holiday. We worked 18 days straight. and pretty much every day had overtime.
You did stuff outside the park too.
Tried to, yeah, but it was hard. I mean, yeah, I'm amazed I was able to get away to do the Southern Comfort stuff. I lucked out being able to do that. But at any rate, I just decided, I think I want to go to college for real. I couldn't make that work with our schedule, because even though we had a lot of time off during the week, but still worked 40 hours a week, we'd get called out to a special event in Dallas or somewhere, and and so I just decided, I think I want to go and study something else, not study music, and ultimately decided on studying molecular biology and biochemistry, and got a job in a research lab. I did keep playing professionally, and again, lucked on to meeting wonderful people. There was a piano player who went to the rival high school who was a few years older than I was, who started a band, and it was a 5-piece band with marvelous musicians. We played a wide variety of music, so that exposed me to Latin jazz and more contemporary pop stuff. I mean, we did everything from Billy Joel to some Beatles tunes to Airmail Special and Runnin' Wild. And the trumpet player in that band was Ernie Carbajal, who was the trumpet player in Black Swan.
Okay, sure.
And Ernie was a great vibes player as well. And so it was really fun to work with Ernie for many years. And I had known Ernie before because he was a really good friend of Tim Klein's. And so that was a marvelous experience. And then, so I managed to keep in it. And then when I was going through college, as Kit mentioned, we tumbled into each other, and I ended up joining some bands that he had and played with him for a long time. And I really credit Kit with helping me stay in the music probably longer than I would have. I ended up sort of drifting away just simply because I got too busy and, quit his band. It was just a little too much. And then Dana, who led the 5-piece, moved to Portland. So there was a lot less opportunity for me to work with him. And, my day job took me out. By then, I was traveling lots of places in the country or certainly the West Coast or the Pacific Northwest, lots of drive time. And I, started playing less and less and less. And then, with the Jazz Miners, we had a reunion, and that was kind of scary. Well, we did a reunion concert with Southern Comfort to honor Ed. And that was scary for me because I'd kind of lost some of my edge. And but at any rate, those opportunities, the reunion with the Jazz Miners, then I started thinking a little bit more about getting back into it. And then I happened to ultimately move back down here, or move to Northern California. And, people like Bob Ringwald and Bill Dendel and...
Uh-oh. I just lost your picture.
Because we're waiting.
There you go. You're back. However, you have to unmute again.
There we go. I'm back. Yeah, so I was saying that, Bill Dendel, Bob Ringwald, Bob Williams, and Renard Perry, who was a great trumpet player who, when he was young, was Kid Ory's trumpet player. When Kid Ory came to San Francisco and started a club, he hired Renard to play trumpet for a couple of years with him when Renard was probably 20. And those guys all encouraged me to jump back in. And, started.
When I found out you had laxed, I was actually pretty angry.
Well, fortunately, yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, fortunately, I hadn't lapsed so far that I couldn't, kind of get it back fairly quickly, or at least a semblance of it. Again, the Sacramento Jazz Society sessions, was a monthly opportunity, and maybe I didn't get to play every month, but there were a lot of times where they would call me and ask me to, be on one of the sets with the guest artists, and which for me was like, oh my gosh, you kidding me? Really? You want me? And, it was stressful because it's sort of like, okay, I need to listen with really big ears, or do my best to try and listen with big ears. but it was fun and it was great. There's just so many people who've been so supportive.
Well, that's one thing about our community in general and that's one of the things I'm trying to do through this show is to make sure that the people who play this style, their voices don't go into the darkness unnoticed,
Right.
But because you were in the first band I was in, you're a big part of my psyche and the reason I did all of this, along with all those other guys. And that's kind of like, I don't know what's a good comparison to it, but somebody like one of your favorite teachers stopped teaching.
Right. Well, I think it's personally, I think it's a shame when anybody who plays stops playing. I think that's unfortunate, or if, hopefully they replace, maybe they stop one instrument, but they pick up another or something. But, Renard, he was very good. He happens to live here in Vacaville. And, so we started to talk more and stuff. And he said, I play in this.
Are you in Vacaville?
Yeah, I live in Vacaville. Yeah. And he said, I play in this Living History Glenn Miller recreation swing band. You should come up and, go to a rehearsal or come to the gig and see what you think. And because they were sort of, they had some movement of players because some of them were younger and, would, go off to graduate school or something like that. And anyway, the tenor chair came open, the jazz, the fourth tenor or whatever you want to call it chair, the second tenor chair, I don't know. Second tenor chair, I guess, technically. First, the jazz chair. And so, I ended up, he got me into that band, and there's some marvelous musicians in that band, including the leader who just retired from leading that band at the age of 87, Grant Pyle, great trombone player, good singer, great arranger. And even though he would wear Glenn Miller's uniform with major insignia, the rank of a major, he was actually a retired general and was the chief pilot for the governors of the state of California for a number of years. So he was just an amazing, interesting guy and a great group of people and a pretty good, it's a fun band to play with, full big band, guy singer, girl singer, and then some of the other musicians sing. And so they do for freshman material. And so that helped me like, oh, I really can read charts. It's hard work, but I really can. And having to, stumble through that and, that was fun. And we had a regular gig once a month until, things got shut down until March. Our last performance was scheduled, I think, for March 25th or something. And, we wisely canceled it. And the band hasn't played since. I hope, soon we can ramp that back up because it was fun. We had a great audience that would come. We played at a Elks Club up in Carmichael that their ballroom, it's just like a throwback to 1947. Huge dance floor, great stage, just the way it's designed. And it's fun. Yeah.
So many of my favorite musicians came from that area. Of course, she's just moved with Bonnie Otto. Actually, from Carmichael. My sister lived in Carmichael up until she passed a couple of years ago. But boy, I don't know how to explain it, but so much. Well, obviously the Jubilee had a lot to do with it, but there's so many great jazz musicians in the Sacramento Bay Area.
Yeah, I want to mention some other people too. I just feel like there's so many people I want to thank for what they've given me and what they've allowed me to do, and that's the All Brothers.
I've been working with them on trying to get all of them onto an interview at the same time. So
yeah, well, the younger two have been very, very gracious and kind to me, and have thrown me a lot of work. And there's a bass player here in town, Sacramento, Zach Sappenor, who has also thrown me a fair amount of work. Bob Williams, has thrown me some work, and I just those kind of opportunities are just really fun and
if
enjoyable.
you didn't know it, Mark, not only are you talented, but you're a very nice person, and well, I'm actually not saying that flippantly. When you get on stage and you want to share all of yourself with an audience and with other musicians, it's important who you're standing next to. And you're somebody that nobody minds standing next to, both because of your musical expertise and because you're just a nice guy. And that sounds casual, but I don't mean it to be casual. You know?
Yeah. Well, I try. I try hard to be,
I'm just saying, stop being so humble.
Yeah.
No, no. I gotta reminisce a quick story just about you, and it's not really a story so much, but we were flying somewhere, and you were always dressed very nicely. You used to, when we get on the airplane, you would wear a suit jacket and an open collar shirt and a pair of gray slacks, and that was before earbuds like we're both wearing right now. So you had a set of headphones around your head, and you were walking down the aisle, and some passenger mistook you for the pilot. You remember that?
No.
Oh, I do. Excuse me, young man, can you tell me when we're going to hit whenever it was, St. Louis, or when we're going to arrive in New York? I busted up. But you were dressed like a pilot, and you had a headset on. So, anyway.
Yeah.
I also remember when when we were in Florida, one more for me, and that's we were playing at a gigantic shopping center that had all the wild birds in the main section.
Yeah, there was a big arboretum kind of thing.
Yeah, and they decided we were going to play for lunchtime, where all the business were. Well, we were playing, and nobody showed up to the arboretum, and we were playing for flamingos and whatever wild birds were around, and we got done with our first tune. It must have been Tiger Rag or something, really ta-da, and we got done, and somewhere there's a recording where we get "Diet," and you hear from you, "What? No applause?" And it was like ringing in the arboretum. But anyway.
There's a recording of that one?
Somewhere. I think Brian might have one. Or
somewhere.
You remember Bob Hauser, the guy who came along as our sound guy?
Yeah. Right.
I think he had recorded that. Anyway.
Yeah.
So those were my memories, my two fondest memories of my time with you. Not to mention Daytona Beach, but that's a different story.
Yeah, right. That's it. Like talk about a crazy venue to put a Dixieland band in. Why are we here? I don't know, but hey, you want us to play? You're taking good care of us while we're on the road. Happy to oblige.
You got to hang out with Playboy bunnies. What more is there?
Yeah, I do remember being in Marquette.
Yes.
Or where Marquette is, the city Marquette's in.
God, I remember a story about. You're probably going to tell the same story. Go ahead.
Well, it was a Sunday night, and the town we were in, it completely shuts down on Sunday night. And I remember Ed Slauson and Bill Liston were hungry. They wanted ice cream sundaes, and you could get an ice cream sundae, or you could get ice cream, I think, from the room service, but that was about it. And so we were trying to figure out, well, how could we make it more like a sundae? And I think I got the idea of going down to the bar and asking the bartender, hey, do you have any chocolate syrups or anything? He said, no, but I've got, this liqueur and this thing and this thing. And so we basically got, I don't know, we must have got some cups with different
toppings. Cream de cacao and creme de menthe.
Yeah, exactly. And took them back up to Bill and Ed's room, and they made ice cream sundaes with this stuff. I just remember okay, wow, this town really does roll up at dark on a Sunday. There's nothing, nowhere to go, no restaurants, nothing open.
You just brought another memory back, and it was when we stopped something like at 2 a.m. at a IHOP. It might have been in Florida, but we had gotten in really late. And we were all starving, and we went into a IHOP. I believe it was an IHOP, and there was one table in there other than us. So we all walked in, and somebody from the other table looked up at us and said, "You'll be sorry," and we all sat down, and got menus out. And about a half an hour later, the waitress shows up. You remember
Mm-hmm.
that? And
I
she takes our
think I'm.
order and goes in the back. And then about a half an hour later, again, she comes out and she says, "I think it was to you. I'm sorry, we're out of corned beef hash." After like a half an hour, and you looked up her and you said, "Did you look everywhere?"
I don't remember that. I don't remember that one.
It was either you or Howard
Oh
that
my
said
gosh.
that, but it was. And then when she did bring our order out, she brought it to the other table, and then they said, "No, no, no, that's theirs."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just
The price. So yeah, that was probably the one extreme of that tour in terms of restaurant service, and then there was the other extreme when we were at the Waldorf Astoria for a week, and service was not an issue, and it was just like.
That was when Bill Lister ordered the prime rib well done.
I do remember another story, which is we were in Chicago, I think, and we heard, and I don't know if we played also or if we just went. I know we did a radio show, and maybe that was the city where it was Count DJ.
Yes.
I think was the name of and then we went to a club to hear a band play, and there was a somewhat famous, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's probably better that I don't, clarinet player who led the band. And we went to hear this band, and I don't know, Dan or Brian or Howard, it had to be one of those three, or maybe all of them in concert, said, "Oh, yeah, Mark, sorry, we want to restate. You're the second loudest clarinet player in the world. That guy is the loudest clarinet player in the world." And of course, I felt so much better.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being a loud clarinet player, especially when you're surrounded by horns and banjos.
Well, I had to learn a different style. I was used to playing outdoors, with Rusty and Brad on plectrum banjo, and that's some volume to get up and over.
Well, you have to admit the guy that you were in an outing with, Bob Reitmeyer, is probably the antithesis of what you were playing. You've heard Bob.
Marvelous player. I love his playing. Yeah,
very classically based, and keeps his embouchure close to his body, and very, very tasteful. But loud isn't a term that would be necessarily associated with Bob. So we were A and B, you guys. It's kind of like Denny and Howard,
I'm happy to report that yes, it is possible to learn new things and to improve and to be a better player over time, and to listen to your learned colleagues who help you see a different way. And there's many who I could thank for that. But
well, there's a difference between being a stick in the mud and being an entertainer. Which is also is another slippery slope when it comes to how seriously you take yourselves as a jazz artist.
Right.
People of high artistic values at times tends to forget who actually is paying them the check.
Yeah. I was going to make another point because it's come up in a number of the interviews you've done with people, and it's about this particular form of music requires so much interplay and listening and working as a team in service to the whole, right? A really good band, no one's trying to outdo or outshine, or, everybody's constantly thinking and listening, how can I fit? How can I make it work, cohesively and better and play off of the other person or people? Not only the trumpet, but the trombone, like in a three-horn line, for example, and then with the rhythm section. And I think, it goes along with learning how do you get along with people? First, in this situation, it's like musically you're trying to connect and get along. And then, you have to deal with each other on the bandstand or in the band. You have to listen for the communications, like, who's going to, and watch or listen for the, what the trumpet player is how they're going to lead you on what's next. And I can't help but feel like that knowledge that we all gained in doing that, and the repetition of practicing that way and really working and striving like that has really actually enabled me in my entire career, my civilian career. That ability to listen, it's been so beneficial. And, it's the gift that keeps on giving, I think. Of course, I talk a lot, but, I'm still working on that part. But
well, I think you're absolutely right. I've always argued that I think band, of course, I'm also an educator, that band is the perfect social structure for teaching citizen behavior, as opposed to football.
Yeah.
Not to have anything against for sports or professional sports or high school sports, but when you have individuals who are striving for individual achievement as opposed to in a band setting, where it is exactly what you just stated, not only is it good for business, but it's good for life.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the things I asked you not to talk about what's going on in our country right now, but listening would be a good thing.
Listening would be a good thing. Yeah, listening would be a good thing, and listening to music would be a good thing.
Yeah, Mark, I'm so glad you agreed to do this, and thank you for doing this. Now, all I need is for all of you guys that I interviewed. Let me think here. So we've got John Brand, and Mark Curry, and Matt Johnson, and we've got John Allred, and all these guys need to talk to Rusty Stiers, because I'd love to do Jazz Miners Reunion interview with everybody and just banter those stories around,
Yeah, there's certainly plenty of those stories, that's for sure. I mean, there's so many stories even at Disney, but there's plenty of stories outside of Disney.
I want to hear more about the water-filled trash cans at the Bix Festival,
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then it's just some of the stuff that we pulled, with the Main Street Maniacs, Jeff Beaumont and Steve Resnick, I think, were with him at the time, and Ralph Reynolds and Hal Profi. Yeah, and the fun we had when those two bands would collide doing pre-parade, and the antics that would go on, and some of the stuff we pulled. But I'll save that for another time. And maybe we can get the group together, and the large group, all the people that, like you mentioned, were in and out of that group. I'll see if I can get a hold of Rusty. He's kind of hard to reach, but
well, I actually managed to get him on a phone call, and he had told me that he's now doing day trading, and he's done with the park, and he and Tash are enjoying their seclusion at the moment. So, I mean, I understand all that. You've lived as much time in the spotlight as he has. A little bit of privacy is a nice thing.
Yeah.
But he's meant so much to so many people. I don't know if you saw my interview I did with Matt Perrine.
I did. Yeah.
And Rusty even influenced his life.
I went up to visit the band camp a couple of years ago, and Bill asked me to sit in and with the professors, and Matt. I didn't know who Matt was. Matt didn't know who I was, and I think Howard was there also at that particular session. And somehow it came out that I was an original jazz miner. And Matt stopped. He literally, between tunes, he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And he told me that story about what it meant to him, and just like such an amazing musician. It's like, wow. I don't even know what to say. Anyway, it was marvelous to hear that story directly from him, and it was nice to hear it on your interviews. And Dan, I want to thank you for doing these interviews. I've enjoyed them so much, listening to your conversations with people, and that many of them whom I know, some of whom I don't know very well, but certainly know of them. And now I feel like I know them a lot more, and it's just been fun.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So many things that have happened because of this. Like I said, it was actually my son's idea to put this together. I had done a Zoom interview for his drum and bugle corps, because I was the original arranger for that group, and I got off of that. And the host wasn't very well equipped. He had no idea who I was, and he actually called the chord by its wrong name 3 times in the interview, and I was pretty upset when I got done. My son said to me, "You know, Dad, you need to do that with your friends that you've met over the years. You need to do an
Yeah.
interview show," and that's how this got started. That it was just that
Yeah.
simple. And now,
Well, I've also
everybody's happy that I'm
I've
doing
been
it.
amazed. Yeah. And I've just been amazed at how many people you know and have either, done work with or, it's fun. It's fun to hear all those connections come to life. And,
What's funny is they are all connected. I mean,
yeah.
if not through me, through other means, and it gives you an
Mm-hmm.
idea what this style of music does for people. And another thing,
Yeah.
byproduct that I didn't realize was going to happen was, for example, you would mention another musician, or somebody would mention another musician. All of a sudden, they'd go, "That was really nice. I'll give him a call." And now
Yeah.
connections are being remade, and friendships are being
Mm-hmm.
regenerated. And wow, that was something I never expected to have happen, and which is
Yeah.
not that I even expected, but it was a byproduct I'm really proud of. So thank you,
Yeah.
and make sure that you still look like a pilot. No, I'm just kidding. And seriously, sir, you were an oasis during that tour. Um, you know what I went through, trying to get that done, and of course, guys were writing arrangements for me on the fly and saying, "Don't worry, you'll hear it." And here I was, a high note Latin trumpet player.
Yeah.
You know,
And you did. You pulled it off with aplomb, as they say, and then some.
oh,
I that record, is one of the
by the
recording we
way,
made.
I don't
I
know if you
I
know this.
I love it.
I have the entire record uploaded to my other YouTube channel now. Did you know that?
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. There's
Everything
just
except for
some.
the jingle.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. We can just forget that one. Yeah.
But my
Yeah.
other channel is my name. It's Daniel E. Zeilinger on YouTube,
Yeah.
and I
I'll
have that
check that
entire
one out.
album. I have that entire album on there with
Cool.
you
All right.
and our big band.
Ah.
3 reeds. All right, sir. You take care. Make sure that you say hello to the Jazz Society for me, and I will be
I
getting.
will. What's left of it? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I'll do so.
And you take care now. All right.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye. Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.